What is up everyone, Boshi here back at it in Raid Shadow Legends, and we have another fusion coming up next week, so let's talk about it. Alright guys, so like I said, we do have a fusion coming up next week on September 30th, and yes, the Rorik fusion literally ended about 2 days ago. I'll give my 2 cents on that whole situation at the very end of the video, but I do want to go ahead and jump into the champion and its kit, just because I know that's why people are here. But something I do want to mention before we jump into the champion is the fact that this fusion is going to be very similar to what Under Priest Brogni was, and that's where you built the champions or the epics out of fragments, and then use your epics to build the legendary. So this isn't going to be a traditional fusion where you build 4 rares, you fuse those into an epic, and then the epics all go into a legendary. You're going to build 4 epics from fragments, and then you're going to use those epics to build the legendary. Now, we aren't aware of what the epics are, so I can't really tell you my thoughts on that whole process. It might end up being worth more to keep the epics over the actual fusion itself. We'll just have to see when the epics eventually come out. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into the champion. Alright guys, so the champion's name is going to be Sigmund the Highshield. He is going to be from the Bannerlord faction, a defensive based champion, and he's going to be of the magic affinity. Now aesthetically wise, he does look pretty dang awesome. He looks like a high commander, and his shield looks like it will do some work, but they always hit the nail on the head when it comes to the looks of champions, so that is no surprise. So let's go ahead and take a look at the kit. So on the A1 we have Fairer Fight, attack 1 enemy, removes any shield buffs, also has a 50% chance of removing 1 random buff, has a 75% chance instead when attacking a boss. So we're going to go and piece this apart. So the removal of any shield buffs on an A1 is a very unique type of ability, but I do not foresee this being some type of major crazy ability, right? So when it comes to boss fights, there's not a lot of boss fights that include shields. Now there are bosses that can, take your shield buff and, steal it, like Scarab King or maybe even Dark Fae or something like that, where this could kind of be useful, or maybe even in faction crypts, specific faction bosses or waves, and then same thing with the Doom Tower waves. But in any other place, I just don't foresee this being like some huge thing. But yeah. And then the second part of also has a 50% chance of removing 1 random buff. I do believe you're going to be able to book that up to a 75% chance, which means that 75% chance on bosses will go up to a 100% chance. Now this is going to be like a nice to have in addition to his A1 type of attack, where yeah, if you remove a random buff it's kind of nice, but when it comes to boss fights, not a lot of bosses have buffs to remove, and if they do have a buff that usually it can't be removed, such as like the Doom Tower bosses. So I don't really foresee a lot of usability with this A1, but I'm sure someone will come up with something that proves me wrong on this. But yeah, that's just my first impression. On the A2 we have Battlefield Beacon, attacks all enemies 2 times, each hit has a 50% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn, and then has a 75% chance of placing a big decrease attack debuff for 2 turns, and this ability is going to be on a 4-turn cooldown. So right off the bat, I do like the dual hitting ability, and then I also do think the 50% chance to land that provoke will go up to 75%, and that 75% chance to do the big decrease attack will go up to 100% chance with books. And I also think this will actually go down to a 3-turn cooldown. So with all that said, I do think this will be a really good ability, especially for things like faction crypts or Doom Tower waves, just because it allows for that CC ability, and then allows for that reduced damage incoming from the enemy waves. And it being on a 3-turn cooldown definitely makes it usable. Now, when it comes to multipliers, I'm hoping the multipliers are decent since it is a double hitting ability. But we could actually see that not be the case. Just depends on how they actually want you to build this champion. But yeah, overall not a bad ability. On the A3 we have Shield of the Realm, places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns equal to 30% of this champion's max HP, and then also places a big strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns, and the cooldown is going to be on a 5-turn cooldown. So I don't like when they do this. They do a shield based off of this champion's max HP, but then they make him a defensive based champion. I'm not a big fan of that, because when you look at what they're supposed to be, you're going to want to stack defense, but then they almost force you to stack HP because you want to build the most out of this ability. So I'm not a big fan of that. So on this champion, you might actually want to go more HP more than defense on this, just to get the most out of his A3, which is a very good protection ability, I should say. Having a shield plus a strengthen buff is definitely a very good support type of ability, especially for things that are like hard hitting, like the Doom Tower waves, or even something as simple as Ice Golem, where you're gonna get hit hard, but having that strengthen buff, having the shield from him, depending on his max HP, along with his A2 possibly doing a decrease attack, he can actually mitigate a lot of damage when it comes to doing that type of thing. So he's definitely going to be good at his job for wherever you put him. But yeah, so overall though, I do like his A3. I do think that will go at least down to a 4-turn cooldown. If it remains a 5-turn cooldown, I'm not exactly sure how useful it's going to be. But yeah. And then the last thing is going to be his passive, which is equatable. Whenever this champion is attacked, has a 20% chance of decreasing the duration of all buffs on the attacker by 1 turn, and has a 40% chance instead when attacked by a boss. So right off the bat, I do not think the percentages will go any higher than this with any books. And with that said, I don't see this being so useful. I definitely see this being useful in things like faction crypts and Doom Tower waves, just because you see a lot of buffs take place in there. It could be nice to have that chance to remove the unkillable when you get stuck on some of the waves that have those unkillable champions. If they choose to attack you, you can reduce the duration of it and they can no longer have it. But when it comes to boss fights, yeah, it could actually come in handy versus something like Bommel, as much as he is the weak affinity, but it has that chance to drop the increased attack by 1 duration. Same thing with the Eternal Dragon with the Eternal Rage buff, I believe. If he happens to get that, you can reduce that by 1 turn. But in terms of how useful it's going to be, I just don't foresee it being too crazy. Now, when it comes to things like PvP, where AoE attacks are very common, the reduction of the buffs there could be kind of useful, but it's only a 20% chance, so it's not like it's a very high chance to do so. But yeah, that is, I don't know how I feel about his passive. It's a very unique passive, and I like where they're going with it. I just think the percentages are low, and the use cases for this passive to actually do something are very low as well. But yeah, that is all I have for this guy's kit. Let me go ahead and get back on camera and I'll give you guys my overview. Alright guys, so quick overview and my thoughts on if I think the Highshield is actually going to be worth going for during this fusion event. And I'm going to tell you guys, really, I'm just not excited about this champion, but that doesn't mean the champion is not a good champion and that he's not going to be good at what he does. So quick overview, with his A2, he provides that AoE provoke along with the AoE drop attack, which is automatically a good thing, provides some CC along with a major debuff to mitigate damage. And then you have on top of that the A3, which provides a big shield along with a strengthen buff, which mitigates a lot of damage there as well. Now when it comes to the things that are very unique to him, like his A1 with the removal of shields and then possibly a random buff, the removal of shields is a very unique thing, but I just can't think of any use cases where it's like needed necessarily. Same thing with his passive, right? His passive to reduce the duration of buffs. Yes, it can come in handy with things against like Eternal Dragon, possibly Bommel if you want to throw him in a negative affinity scenario, and stuff like that. But once again, I don't think it's big enough to warrant using him over other things. Now, when it comes to things like faction crypts or Doom Tower waves and stuff like that, I definitely can see him being very useful just because he can get that provoke off. There's a lot of buffs being placed in those places, and so when he's attacked, he has those chances to lower the duration, has the chance to remove them with his A1. The bad thing with it is that his passive has a very low chance when it comes to non-boss, right? It's a 20% chance, so you're depending on a 20% chance just to lower the duration by 1 turn, which is pretty meh, right, when it comes down to it. So overall, I don't think he's a bad champion. I'm just not excited about him. I can't think of a use case where I'm just like, yes, he's going to be a specialist at this or that. So do keep that in mind, and also do remember we don't know the epics that are going into this fusion. The epics could be extremely good, so you might end up actually wanting to keep the epics epics rather than fusing into Sigmund. It's all up in the air right now until we see the epics, but overall I always say if you have the resources, go for the fusion. But my 2 cents on the whole situation of this fusion coming up very quickly though is, yes, we're coming out of a fusion, we're going into the CVC this weekend, and then we're going back into another fusion, which means resources are going to be extremely low, guys. So like I said, or like I usually say, always look at your account, make sure it's actually going to be worth going for, and all that type of stuff. I know a lot of people are getting burnt out on the game just because there's so much going on. It's very demanding as of recently with CVC stuff, with guaranteed champion events, and all that type of stuff. We even have a 10 times Krisk coming up on Friday, so there's just a lot going on, guys. Just make sure you're having fun with the game. If you need to, take a break. But yeah, make sure you're looking at this fusion. Overall, I'm not very excited about the champion, but I will be going for him just because I think, I have the resources, right? So why not? But yeah, that is all I have to say about this. Let me know if you guys will be going for this fusion. Let me know what you guys think about everything that's been going on in the game. If you guys are happy, not, whatnot. Follow me on my social media down in the description below. You can find it, or up on the side. I think YouTube's putting it now. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.